You're going to want to see this if you have a pension that needs to be valued in its separation or divorce situation. Hi, my name is Bev Lewis, and I am thrilled to have my guest today, Jamie Jocsak, who is a pension valuator, and he has his own company called BCH Actuarial Services.
Yes.
Yes. And he often works with our clients to help them value their pensions. So we're going to have a discussion today about the importance of getting your pensions valued if you're going through a separation or a divorce, and what that means to you in respect to dividing up your assets and some of the options that you may have in that process. So welcome, Jamie. I'm really happy that you could join us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So give me a little bit of an idea, give our viewers a little bit of an idea of what kind of work you do. I spoke briefly about valuing pensions. We're going to have the discussion about what a pension is and you know how it can definitely, when you're dividing up the assets, how it can affect the bottom line of your what we call an equalization payment, so dividing up your property. So just give me a little bit of an idea of what it is that you do to help clients if they have pensions.
In Ontario, for most pensions now, you can request the value from the pension plan administrator or your company. And in those cases, I'm generally involved potentially with tax issues in terms of completing your property and reflecting tax properly on the pension. But there's a lot of pensions out there still that you can't get the value from the pension plan administrator. Federal government pensions, Canadian Forces, RCMP, certain other plans, foreign pensions, etc. So I'm brought in to make sure they're given a fair value so they can be compared to other assets on property settlement. So that's a big part of what I do, is both tax on pensions and RSPs and dealing with those other pensions that don't fall within the sort of normal Ontario process.
Okay, so let's back up a little bit. When you say the pension administrator.
Yeah.
So if I work at a company, let's say, because we have a lot of clients that come from emergency services, just for an example.
Yep.
So police officers, firefighters, paramedics,
Yep.
Other professions such as teachers. Teachers have great pensions.
Yes.
So if a teacher, let's just say a teacher. So let's say a teacher comes to us and they're going through a separation. They have a pension through their employment.
Yes.
And the pension administrator to that pension.
Yes.
Can you just talk a little bit about who they are?
Right. So if you're talking about teachers, police, the nurses, you're part of a large pension plan that isn't actually your employer. They're large public sector pension plans, like the Ontario Teachers Pension Plan for teachers, right. OMERS for a lot of municipal workers, police, fire, Ontario Public Service Plan for Ontario OPP officers, etc. And so you actually, every year, you'll receive your annual statement. You'll see the logo at the top, and you'll see the pension company that handles your pension. And so you would contact them, the 1-800 number, the client services number, for your pension plan. For people who are employed by smaller private companies, the company itself will be the administrator. So you'll contact your HR person at your company. So again, there's a bit of variance in terms of how your employer has set up your pension program for your work.
Okay.
As to who you'll contact as your pension contact.
So if I'm a teacher and I contact my pension administrator,
Yeah.
What is it that I'm asking for?
What you want to ask for is you'll just tell them you're going through a marriage breakdown, and in Ontario it's called the Statement of Family Law Value. But usually for most pension plans, all you'll need to say is you're going through a marriage breakdown, and I need to know what the value of my pension is, and they should be able to direct you to the forms and the process you need to complete.
Okay. So one question that I often get from clients is, I have my year-end statement.
Yes.
So there's the number.
Yeah.
And what I am saying to them, and they don't understand this, is that that's a great number, but that's not the value of your pension. So talk to me a little bit about that statement number versus what the actual value of their pension might be.
Right. So starting in 2012, the law in Ontario changed. And so now there's what we call the Ontario family law value for a pension. So it's often denoted FLV, or family law value. So if you see that, it's referring to the specific value that's required under the Ontario Family Law Act. It specifically says when you're going through a marriage breakdown, this is the value of the pension you need to share with your spouse. So now it's defined in the law. The danger with the statement is that sometimes I see individuals using, there's my contributions with interest on my statement. That's how much I put into the plan. But with the defined benefit plan, like it for teachers, police, that's just your contributions. There's employer contributions, and then the value is often many times more than that. So, for example, for a long service police officer, contributions might be $250,000, and I see spouses coming and say, well, there's the value of my pension, as if it's an RSP. And I said, no, those are your contributions with a small amount of interest. The actual value of the pension can easily be $1 million or more.
Yes.
So it's dangerous to use what's on the statement, because you don't know, is that your contributions? And even if it's a value, it's definitely not the Ontario family law value. It's a very specific value.
Right, right. And so the pension holder would send in information, a document to the pension administrator. The pension administrator would value that pension, so going from the $250 that's on the statement to the $1 million that,
yes,
with all the contributions and interest and all of that, they would send that information back to the parties, and then there's a number, the valuation of the actual pension, and then as per family law, that number gets divided. So the one spouse could be entitled to half of the value of
yes,
that pension. So
yes,
can you talk about that a little bit, and what some options are for clients?
Well, one thing I wanted to mention first is that we should very much define the difference between a defined benefit pension and a defined contribution pension. So a defined benefit pension, like police, nurses, they'll know that they have a defined benefit if they look at their annual statement, and it's telling them how much per month they're going to get for their life. A defined benefit promises you so much monthly pension income for your lifetime, whereas a defined contribution plan will just show you an account balance, like an RRSP.
Like an RRSP.
So here's your account balance. So if you have a defined contribution pension, the annual statement value, if it's close to your date of separation, is probably very close to the family law value. It's not. It's just the account value. The problem with teachers, police, and anybody with a defined benefit pension is that the value has to be actuarial valued. How much is it worth to have that much pension for your lifetime? And that requires actuarial tables, etc. And that's what the plan administrator will do. And in those sort of pensions, those are the pitfall pensions, because if you start to guess at the value, use the value on the statement, it can be very, very far off. So it depends what type of pension. I just wanted to mention that because the pitfall is, especially with respect to defined benefit pension, they're the ones that are, for some spouses, shockingly valuable these days. Yeah.
Yes. And we do have clients that, most of the clients that we see aren't aware of what the actual value of their pension is, because they don't get that statement every year. They get what they've contributed, but they don't actually get a statement saying this is how much the actual value is. So when they get that information back, there's a lot of clients that are very shocked at those numbers, and how are we going to now equalize this?
Yeah.
How are we going to divide this?
Yeah.
Because it is such a big number for some people.
It is. And so just to keep in mind for the viewers is that I would say typically these days for your sort of teacher, paramedic, police, fire, if they are full-time, standard sort of Ontario pay scale approaching retirement, you should be expecting a family law value getting close to 7 figures into the million range on a pre-tax basis. And don't be, so if you're mid-career, it's very common, 500,000. It's often worth more than the equity in the home. That's pretty common.
Yes.
But the good news is you can divide it with your former spouse and share that valuable asset. And
so what are some of the options when they're coming to dividing up their property? So
for an Ontario plan, like the most that we're going to see, the options depend on whether the pension's in pay or not. So if the person's if you're receiving your pension, you're retired. You're no longer working.
So pension in pay is for somebody that's already receiving
Yes.
pension
So
funds.
they're retired.
Because they're retired.
We'll call them retirees. So for the retirees, the only option is to just split the monthly pension with your spouse. So basically the pension plan will cut 2 checks. You'll get 1 check and your spouse will get the other check.
Okay.
Your spouse will be taxed on their share, et cetera.
Okay.
And so that's for a pension for retiree. For somebody still working, still contributing to the plan, then the only option is a lump sum transfer to their former spouse's locked in LIRA, a locked in retirement account, or a life income fund, which is like an RSP. It's just you can't take the money out right away. It's locked in.
Right.
So there's locking in provisions that have to be, it's intended to be used for retirement income. So, for example, a lot of cases we see, you and I will see a family law value for a person still working as the teacher. It's $700,000, let's say, and then $350,000 can be transferred from the Ontario Teachers Pension Plan to a LIRA for the former spouse. So the former spouse will have $350,000 and basically a locked-in RSP for their retirement. And then you can equalize the pension that way, so the teacher doesn't have to come up with $700,000.
How do you determine what the tax rate would be on the pension? Because like the house, you're not going to get $700,000 for the house because you have all those expenses. With the pension, you're also not going to get $700,000 because you're going to have taxes. So what are those taxes that we're talking about?
Normally the way that's done is it's a projection of when you're actually retired and receiving the pension, how much tax are you going to pay off of each pension payment when you file your taxes at the end of the year. So we do a projection to say how much total retirement income are you going to have, including Canada Pension Plan, Old Age Security, and project at tax time what percentage of your income every year are you losing to tax. So typically for a teacher or police, those sort of professions, it's in the range of 20% of each payment will be lost to tax. And so we'll take 20% off, reflecting the portion of each pension payment throughout their lifetime that they will have to pay in tax.
Okay, so the tax at retirement is different than the tax at when they're still working.
Yes.
So if I'm a teacher and I'm making, say, $100,000 a year, and I'm just using those numbers for easy calculations. If I'm making $100,000 a year, then my tax rate now, as if I'm still working, could be 45%.
Well, you're marginal, but you're your average tax. We look at average, so we on average for if you look at total tax paid for all of your income, it might be 30% or 35%. You're right, it's higher, because when you receive the pension, when it's taxed, you're retired.
Right.
So you're not receiving $100,000. You might be receiving $50,000 or $60,000 of pension income.
So my tax rate at $100,000 may be what if I'm still working?
Say 30 or 35%.
35%. And my tax rate when I'm retired, because I'm not making that $100,000, could be
20%.
20%. So you're going from 35 to 20%.
Yes.
So that is a calculation that somebody like you, an actuary, needs to do during a marriage breakdown for the equalization of your property, because you're not going to divide that pension at $700,000. You're going to divide that pension at $700,000 minus how much you would have to pay for it in tax, pay in tax on that, and then whatever's left over you're the actuary, so $700,000 at a 20%
so less
tax rate,
140, so
less
560,000.
So you have 560 versus the matrimonial home or the home that you're selling that may be 650,000 after all of the expenses.
Exactly.
So you still have a little bit of an offset there.
Exactly.
Okay.
And
so that is where we bring you in to do that tax rate, so that clients know what the kind of the fair value of the pension.
Right, and what we see a lot, and you see this as well, it's not expensive to do that calculation, but some people don't want to do it. They say, well, we'll just use a tax rate. But keep in mind, when a pension's worth $800,000, 1% makes a big difference on a tax rate. So sometimes, in terms of equity for both parties, it's better to have an independent calculation done for equity. But again, it's up to each spouses what they want to do with their asset division. But in terms of equity, it's a good idea.
Right. So what are some of the pitfalls of the whole pension issue and going through separation and who does what?
I think we've touched on a few of them. I would say number one would be spouses either being extremely attached to keeping their pension or being very attached to keeping the matrimonial home. I would suppose you really need to keep in mind when you're going through a marriage breakdown, your reality after a marriage breakdown is going to be very different. So you need to keep in mind, you need two things to live financially. You need cash to either purchase a home or to make immediate investments, and you need income.
Yes.
And I think people really need to keep in mind, where are you going to be in retirement? Often it's a good idea for spouses to share the pension if one spouse doesn't have one, to protect both in retirement.
Yes.
And it's a good idea that they share equity in the home so they can both move on with their lives.
Yeah.
And so I would suggest people not be too emotionally attached to some idea of keeping their pension or idea of keeping the home. Think about what's best for them holistically, both of them moving forward. And usually when that's kept in mind and you're thinking of both, okay, well, how much cash do I need to move on with my life, and I do need income protection in my retirement years, then that perspective usually will help the couple come to a better agreement for both of them.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, because I do work with a lot of clients that there may be, let's just say, stereotypically, husband is a police officer, he's got $1 million pension, wife is a stay-at-home mom and has been a stay-at-home mom for many, many years, and she does not have a pension. So when they separate, if he keeps his pension, he's going to have a good lifestyle when he retires, and she's going to probably struggle. So thinking about those kinds of things in a long term, not just what's good for us right now at age 50 or 55, what's going to happen in our retirement years at age 60, 70, 80, how are we going to be able to survive and pay for what we need to live off of? And
probably the worst pitfall in this extreme example, which I've been involved in a number of cases every year of separations that were resolved, quote unquote, 10 or 15 years ago. But what the parties did is one said, I want to keep the house, say I'm the stay-at-home mom, and the kids are with me. You'll keep your pension. Never really got values on anything. 10, 15 years down the road, the disparity in their standard of living is dramatic.
Yes.
Because the person who kept the house has equity but is very short on income. The person with the pension often say had a career promotion in the meantime and has an extremely generous pension in retirement.
Right.
And then they end up back in mediation or in legal proceedings trying to sort out, okay, what should have been done back at that time. Yeah. And they realize that, that really wasn't an equitable division. And that's not a situation any spouse wants to find themselves in. No. So cutting corners now, saving money on mediation or legal fees usually just results in a lot more down the road in many cases because especially when you're dealing with things such as pensions, because if people keep in mind that an employment pension could easily be worth, even for a young person, a few $100,000, for an older person, $1 million. It's not something that you want to use rough numbers with. You want to be informed about it prior to making an agreement for property settlement.
Yeah. So make sure. It's so important. Make sure that you're not just looking at today. Looking at that big number and coming out of mediation or out of litigation and saying, I'm going to get $500,000 out of my settlement, because it does look like a big number, but years down the road, when you're living in poverty and you have no income, you really need to take a really good look at not just the numbers today, but how those numbers are going to affect you in the future.
Right, and I would strongly suggest anybody going through a marriage breakdown, if you're financially savvy, you can do it yourself, but if not, get help from a financial planner or somebody specializing in divorce, financial analyst, because people get a little bit, I would say, lack of perspective, because like you said, I have $500,000, but what's your lifestyle like? How much are you living on right now? And if you need $100,000 a year to maintain your lifestyle, $500,000 isn't going to be sufficient in retirement. It obviously, with interest, it might last you 6 years. So I find that a lot of times it's also grounding. Both parties say, listen, you have to really think about where you want to be now and in the future, and try to share those assets that exist in the family in the best way for everybody. And and also keeping in mind that if one spouse is severely disadvantaged, it might likely result in dispute down the road. So it serves, even from a selfish perspective, it serves both spouses' interests to make sure that it's as equitable as possible. Because it protects both of them for a long-standing agreement that will never be challenged in the future.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, this has been very educational. I know that there's a lot of people out there that don't know much about pensions, or especially getting their pensions valued, or the actual value of their pensions. So I hope that that it was a good eye-opener for some of you that are considering going through separation or divorce and have pensions, to definitely do your homework, be educated on what your rights and obligations are, and reach out to people that are professionals in this area that can help you to determine proper values and again, what your rights and obligations are. So thank you very much for being with me today.
Thanks for having me, Bev.
Yeah.